Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this new series of webinars with the Spain-US Chamber of Commerce. Today, we are going to talk about LATAM taxation and a lot of interesting comparatives between Colombia, Mexico, Chile, and Peru. But before I introduce our speakers today, I just want to remind everyone about other events that we are hosting at the Spain-US Chamber of Commerce. So for those that are not familiar with the Spain-US Chamber of Commerce, we are a nonprofit organization that help businesses develop their projects in the United States mostly. We have more than 500 members from many different industries, and we organize a lot of different events during the year, like this webinar, for example, but also a lot of different in-person events, mostly in Miami, Florida, where we have our headquarters based. For today's panel, we have Excelia, which is a consultancy company that will discuss with us about the key in things and important things about taxation overview in Latin America. Excelia is a global consulting technology and professional service company with more than 20 years of experience and offices in LATAM, Europe, and the United States. And they have three main business areas: technology consulting, professional and financial services, helping their clients with the compliance with regulation of each country, and best practices research. And today, to talk about LATAM taxation overview, we have Javier Monge, which is a BPS LATAM and Europe manager. Javier has more than 25 years of experience in the area of business consulting, and he has been for 9 years the general manager of an international consulting firm in Chile. Now he works as regional director of the BPS line at Excelia, and he lives in Spain. Welcome, Javier. And we also have with us today Cesar de Santiago, Managing Director, BPS and Country Manager in the United States. Cesar has a professional career that began more than 25 years ago in the consulting and taxation area, and he has been General Manager of the Business Process Solution area in Excelia for more than 8 years, and he lives in Miami. Welcome, Cesar. Also, I would like to remind everyone that we will host a Q&A after the presentation, as we always do. So for those of you interested in sending some questions for our panelists, please do so. And you can do that not only at the end, you can do and send those questions during the whole presentation. In order to do that, you just need to go to the control panel that will appear probably in the right side of your screen, and click the tab that says questions, and you click on that tab, you write the question and send it to us. We will receive all the questions and address them at the end of the presentations. We will have around 15-20 minutes to talk about anything that has been discussed during the presentation, but also we will share not only this presentation, but also the video and the contact information of Javier and Cesar. So in case you need to contact them directly for a specific question, you can do so and send them directly an email. And last thing, check in our website all the events that we are hosting for the next months. Our website is www.spainuschamber.com. and you will be able to check there all the events that are going to happen for the next month. And now, without further ado, I will leave Javier Monge to start with this presentation and to learn a little bit more about LATAM taxation, and specifically in Colombia, Mexico, Chile, and Peru. Thank you so much, Javier.
Thank you, Juan Carlos, for the introduction. Hello, good morning. And afternoon for some of you, and welcome to this webinar on taxation in 4 Latin American countries. Although we render services in more than 10 countries in Latin America, our 4 main offices are in Chile, Mexico, Colombia, and Peru. That's why this webinar will focus on the tax system of these 4 countries. I'm very happy to share this moment with you. Thank you very much for your assistance. My name is Javier Monge, BPS Manager in Excelia. At Excelia, we have been accompanying international companies for more than 25 years, providing solutions and value in technology and accounting, payroll, and tax services. Our webinar aims to give an overview of these countries, and we hope you find it useful, either because you already have a business running there, or maybe because you are thinking about start an activity in some of them. Let me say that this webinar is not aimed to give a consultancy. Each case must be independently analyzed by local experts. So in the event you have any question that require analysis, we will be happy to receive your request at our personal emails. I will detail the index and the structure that this webinar will have. We will review the following matters of each of these countries: legal corporate entities, V.A.T, value-added tax. We will talk about corporate tax also, income tax for non-residents, and finally about tax news in these countries. So let's start. Starting for Mexico, we have the type of commercial companies, but the most common and used by international companies are the limited liability company and the anonymous company. To set up this type of commercial company, you need a minimum of 2 partners and a maximum of 50 for limited companies, and for anonymous company is unlimited. The minimum capital to establish a corporation in Mexico is 3,000 Mexican pesos for limited companies and 50,000 Mexican pesos for anonymous companies. One peculiarity of this type of company is that a minimum of 50% of the capital must be paid before establishing the company, and in addition, 5% of the capital must be saved per year for the legal reserve fund. Please note that this is a mercantile regulation, is not a tax regulation. Regarding Colombia, these are the most common companies, and the most used by foreign companies is the simplified joint stock company. It requires a minimum of 1 shareholder and a maximum is unlimited. There is a maximum of 2 years to subscribe the social capital. And another feature about this kind of company is that the tax audit is not mandatory, except for those companies whose gross income is greater than approximately about 750,000 US dollars, or gross assets are equal or greater than approximately $1.2 million. With respect to Peru, commercial companies are those shown in the slide. The most used by foreign companies is usually anonymous company. In Peru, you have 3 types of anonymous company, but the most used is the closed corporation. The minimum number of shareholders is 2, the maximum is 20, and there is no minimum capital except for some specific activities. Also, the formation of a board director is not mandatory. Company can be directed by 1 or more general managers, could be also foreigners. Regarding Chile, let's talk about Chile now. Common companies are the ones detailed in the slide, and the most used by foreign companies is the joint stock company. This type of company needs at least 1 shareholder, can be more. One of the characteristics is that the employer's salary is not limited to be considered as a deductible for the corporate tax. And in the case, as it's in the case for limited companies, where directors' salaries are limited to approximately about 3,600 US dollars. Now we are talking about the value-added tax and its operation in these 4 countries. Regarding Mexico, general V.A.T rate is 16%. There are some goods and services that have 0% rate. For instance, basic food, medicines, medical service, newspapers, public transport, among others. It's possible to request VAT refund for the purchases of fixed assets as long as the requirements are met. For instance, one of these requirements is when the creditable VAT requested is greater than 1 million Mexican pesos and that it represents more than 50% of the total amount. VAT is declared on monthly basis, approximately 17 of each month. So yes, you can pass to the other slide. Let's talk about Colombia. VAT has different rates. 19% is the general one. They have a reduced VAT of 5% for some goods like bicycles, sanitary towels, electric cars, and others, and 0% for some food, medicines, paper, books, and others. The tax has two taxable periods. One is bi-monthly, and another is 4-month period, which payments dates are in May, September, and June. It will be bi-monthly for those companies that have exceeded approximately income greater than 800,000 US dollars, approximately, in the previous year. So, or if the company is in the first year, so since there is no background, it's not mandatory. It will be by 4-month period for the rest of companies. A special characteristic for Colombia is that VAT for the purchase of fixed asset is not creditable, so you cannot deduct this VAT, but rather represents a higher value. So what happens with VAT? It's an expense or not? Well, in somehow you recover the tax paid for the greater depreciation of the asset through the corporate tax. Another difference is that when a company is paying services to a foreign company and the service is considered taxable for VAT in Colombia, the payer needs to declare the VAT in Colombia. So this is called like theoretical VAT because the final effect for the company is zero. So you pay the VAT based on the payment you made abroad. And then this payment is also deductible for VAT purposes. So at the end, it's a matter of cash flow and control. Passing to Peru. In Peru, VAT is usually called the General Tax of Sales, IGP. And the general tax rate is 16%. This rate was increased in 2011 by an additional rate of 2% corresponding to the municipal promotion tax. So at the end, all taxable sales are charged with 18% of tax. There are some goods and services that are exempt of VAT, vegetable, fruits, meat, public transport, among others. VAT is declared and paid on monthly basis on the following months, according to the tax calendar of each company. And this calendar is linked or it depends to the last digital number of the tax ID. Regarding VAT refund for the purchase of fixed asset, it's possible, but it's limited to projects of more than $2 million and that meet the requirements and conditions established by the regulation. Okay, now I would like to talk to you about the deductions and how they work in Peru. Yes, please, Cesar, you can go back to the other slide, please. Yes, deduction, that's it. So, what are the deductions? First step, so companies that provide goods and services that are affected to deduction must obtain their own company account in the Bank of the Nation. So a company that provides goods and services, probably most of them, but not all, that are affected to deduction. So they issue the invoices and they must include this taxation. And how it works, let's give an example. So think about the sale that is tax affected to VAT and which amount is, let's say, 100 soles plus VAT. So the total invoice to be paid would be 118 soles. So the detraction says that 12%, in case it's 12%, of the total amount owned, including VAT, in this case would be 14 soles, has to be paid in the client's bank account of the Bank of Nation. So the purpose of this account is only to be used to use its balance for the payment of taxes, fine, and other obligations with the Peruvian authorities. Funds in this account cannot be used for any other purpose and cannot be withdrawn at company's will. So only if you meet some requirements, you can request a release of funds. Now, yes, you can pass the slide. Let's talk about VAT in Chile. General VAT in Chile rate is 19%. It also has exempt services, although recently a modification of the value-added tax reduced the exempt services, leaving only a few, such as transportation of people, education, health, others. A specific feature in Chile regarding the VAT is that all companies declaring for first-time activities affected to VAT, they must prove the activity declared with an online request and attaching some documentation such as contracts or purchases and some others prior the authorization of the tax office to carry on the activity. Another feature is that companies that have sales affected and with VAT and others that are exempt, so they must calculate the deductible VAT proportional to the sales for those expenses that are shared for both activities. If one expense is clearly linked to some of the activities, it can directly apply to that activity. It's also possible to request VAT by refund for the purchase of fixed assets, as long as the requirements established by the law are met. So, for example, that the purchase has been purchased at least for the 2 consecutive periods, or they have completed the form and the corresponding file. Now, we will show you a brief summary of this tax that we have commented in these 4 countries, comparing rates and other features. Before passing to the next part of the webinar, that we will talk about the corporate tax. Corporate tax in Mexico, the name in Mexico for this tax is the income tax, is ISR. General rate is 30%. A mandatory prepayment to the tax authority, it's required. So the way to make this payment is by applying a tax rate to the gross sales of the month. So the tax rate is given by the tax office and calculated according to the income declared in the corporate tax of the previous year. So this means that for the first year of the activity, since there is no background, it will not be mandatory. And in the annual declaration, these payments will be applied as a credit to the final tax or returned to the company when applicable. More things, the authority allows us to correct the tax submitted up to 3 times without penalties by making a complementary declaration. In case there is a payment involved, only interest will be applied to the taxes, but if the declaration was not made, penalties then are applied. General prescription period in Mexico is 5 years, but please note that the date or the limitation period will count from the last modification presented and not from the taxable event. Regarding Colombia. Regarding the corporate tax in Colombia, we highlight the following. Today, the general rate applied in Colombia is 35%. The tax will be presented between the 10th of April and the 8th of May, depending also on the company's tax calendar, which also depends on the last digit of the tax identification number. Companies have up to 3 years counted from the date on which the deadline to declare and then the declaration is considered infirm. An interesting aspect that applies in Colombia is that large company must pay in advance 20% of the tax paid on the previous year. And this is done on the month of February, and this prepayment will be considered or used as a credit for the final payment of the corporate tax. About Peru, general corporate tax is corporate tax that applies is 29.5%. It's also mandatory to make a monthly prepayment. It's based on the gross sales of the month, and the tax rates applied will be calculated in each case, but the minimum is 1.5%. Prescription period in Peru is 4 years and 6 for those ones that have not submitted the respective declaration, or in case of having withheld amount and not paid to the authorities, prescription applicable could rise up to 10 years. A specific feature is that the qualification from the tax office is as a good payer. So one of the benefits is having a bit longer term for payment of taxes. So this condition will be obtained in case the company does not have any debts or other tax obligations pending during some period of time. Regarding Chile, let's pass slide, please. Yes. The general corporate tax in Chile is 27%. It's important to determine the tax regime of each company, since there are different rules for each of them. In some cases, you can choose it, and in others, the regime is by default. Currently, we have 5 different tax regimes that are in force. An example could be the regime of called ProPyme for small and medium companies, which has a reduced rate of 10% for 2022 and will be 25 from 2023 on. Some of the difference of each regime that can affect the following, that can affect the companies are the following features: to if they carry a complete accounting or a simplified accounting, whether it is affected or exempt from final taxes, or different percentage in the annual tax. The general prescription period in Chile, and the general one, is 3 years, and in some specific cases can be 6. Another special characteristic of taxes in Chile that affects the corporate tax return is the concept of rejected expenses. The rejected expenses are those expenses registered in the accounting or paid by the company that are not part of the economic activity of the company. So those expenses cannot be accredited or deducted. These expenses will have an application of 40% of penalty in case of an inspection or in case you declare it voluntary. Now you can see also a brief summary about the commented, comparing the 4 countries regarding the tax rate and the other features. Now, I would like to talk about the income tax applied. No, sorry, before that, I will give a brief review about the annual declarations. I won't explain it in just to show you a bit some of the most important annual declarations that has to be informed to the government in each of the countries. Here we have the ones for Peru, for Mexico, highlight the transfer pricing declaration, which it depends if you have to submit a local report by the 15th of May or master file or country by country report by the end of the year. Regarding Colombia, here are shown some of the most important informative declarations to be submitted. Also important to highlight the transfer pricing, and also depending if you have to report only the local report or also the master file, which will be by the end of the year. Regarding Peru, also you have some of them here highlighted. There is also a transfer pricing form to be submitted in June. And finally, some informative declarations in Chile. Can you please, Cesar, pass the, yes, thank you. These are some of the most important. There are many informative declarations in Chile that has to be reviewed, but these are the most common ones. Also highlight the transfer pricing that the deadline is the 13th June. So now we can pass. And now I would like to talk about the income tax applied to non-resident subjects. So are those withholdings applied to payments made from any of these countries abroad and that are considered income from a local source? So here you can see a table that summarizes the different rates applied to payments according to the nature of the gain. So in case of not applying this withholding, the payer is jointly responsible of this tax. So it's for this reason that we highly recommend to do a deep analysis of each of the payments to other countries. It is also very important to check if these payments are being made to a country with a double taxation agreement or not, that maybe vary the rate applied. So let me aim also that the Chilean double taxation agreement has a particularity that it's informally called the Chilean clause, and it's only applied on payment of dividends to non-resident subjects. So what says is that in case of distribution of benefits, the local tax rate will apply. So it's like an exception of the bilateral agreement. In addition, there are other agreements that are also of interest for international company, some such free trade agreements, exchange of information, and also social security agreements on the posting of workers. So this last is also a very important aspect that could be analyzed, perhaps in another webinar. And so I take advantage to ask you, in case you find it interesting in reviewing general aspects of the local and international labor legislation in these countries, if you can send us your comments so and that we can think about organizing a webinar focused on labor legislation. So that could be very appreciated. Now, I will briefly comment some of the main news tax matters worthy to highlight in these 4 countries. Regarding Mexico, there are no substantial changes to the fiscal laws. The government has decided to give an image of legal certainty for foreign investors just to attract capital and invest for the country. However, some updates like the change from the corporation tax regime, it used to RIF, to the simplified regime of confidence, now called RSC. So that aims to simplify the payment process and expand the range, not increase, but expand the range of payers. Secondly, the withholding rates that were updated downwards. So the workers will receive a higher salary and their tax will be lower comparison to 2022, around 1 to 4% approximately. And finally, we would like to highlight a reduction on the taxation on bank interest. On Colombia, through our office in Colombia, we would like to tell you about some of the main aspects of the latest tax reform in Colombia. Actually, is the one that has received the greatest change compared to the previous law. As you can see, regarding the sale of shares, the percentage have increased from 10 to 20. Article 10 is about changing in the way to determine the final tax. So to give you an example, previously the municipal tax paid, called ICA, was directly applicable to the corporate tax. However, now the tax is not directly applied to the net tax, but deductible as an expense. Article 14, list of new limits on tax benefits. For example, the limits for contributions on the training of employees, voluntary pensions, and others have increased. Article 16 is about profits in sales of shares registered in the stock exchange. It was not taxable up to 10%, and now the non-taxable range has decreased up to 3%. Article 32 regarding occasional earnings, so those ones that are not specific to the business are taxed from 10% to 15%. Another important aspect is that now all those foreign companies that have received income from Colombia significantly, so there is a limit, they may be now subjected to income tax. This will happen when those foreign companies have had gross income during the year greater than approximately $280,000 US. For these cases, 3% of the total income will be now applied. Now, regarding Peru, not many changes on taxation issues for Peru. I would like to highlight the following: reduction to the hotel industry in the V.A.T, which is now 10% instead of 18. It will be applicable until the end of 2024 and could be extended. Also, we have now a higher deduction on investment on scientific research. Another new refund of V.A.T on mining and hydrocarbon activities. And also an important change is that companies suspected of not having operational capacity, that's the name, will be subject now to greater control and inspection. Some of the indicators that will give alert to this qualification will be the number of employees, the lack of assets or infrastructure, or in cases of high benefits, among others. So this is with the aim to avoid tax evasion and V.A.T fraud. And finally, about Chile, some of the significant points to the tax novelty in Chile are the following. Many services used to be exempt of V.A.T are now taxes with the general rate. The application of a new tax called wealth tax, although some points are still under discussion. It will apply as next year, 2024, and it will be applied to heritage greater than approximately $1.2 million US. Not a reform, but a change considered and applicable also before commented from 2023 is about the tax regime pro pyme, small and medium companies that will rate the companies in 25% instead of 10%. And another interesting point, not so new since it's already enforced since 2 years ago, more or less, is the taxation on digital platforms for non-resident companies, which require prior registration of these companies to use a simplified system for paying this digital fee. These are some of the news that we share with you. Clearly, there is a lot of detail in each of them and many news that we have no time to comment. I hope that all this information has helped you to get a general idea about taxation in these countries. So thank you very much for your attention. We are going to share this presentation to those interested. So please send us your comments and we remain at your disposal for any question. And once again, thank you very much to the Spanish Chamber for this space and to all of you for having joined this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you so much. So now we're going to open the Q&A part. So please send us our questions and we will be able to address all of them or almost all of them now in these minutes that we have. In order to send us the questions, you just need to go to the control panel that it's probably on the right side of your screen. Click on the tab that says questions, write the questions and send it to us. And yeah, there you are. You have there the instructions also. Let's go and solve some of the questions that we already have. So let's see. First question that we got, Javier. Is there any significant tax change expected in Peru due its political situation at this time?
Nothing announced for the moment, since there is, but I would like to highlight regarding this. Maybe some changes are introduced later, but I want to take profit about this question just to highlight that the case that the international companies or big companies can apply or can request like an agreement with the government in order to keep the taxation system for some period of time. So this agreement is normally done for international companies that has some investments greater than I think it was 5 million US dollars from two. Let me check it. I will tell you later, but it's about 2 or 5 million US dollars, million dollars, and so it means that any change that happens in Peru for for the next year, so it will not be affected to the company. So this is something I think interesting in Peru that many companies applied for.
Thank you, Javier. Next question. How do we proceed for US companies selling in Colombia that are being withheld taxes in Colombia?
Okay, so I guess it's referring to the new tax that applies. It's also required a declaration on these cases. So through our office, we can help with the request, and also there are many, since there is new some particularities of the procedure has to be analyzed, because this is just a reform just taken from the oven. But yeah, it means that when the sales overcome the minimum stated by law, so it requires a registration and posterior payment of the tax.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question that we have is, what are the times expected to incorporate in any of the countries mentioned during the presentation?
Okay, well, it's difficult to define a period. I would say in general is very fast. Every year since a long time ago has the government has make faster and easier the incorporation of international company in these countries. So technology has helped a lot, and also because of the of the COVID situation has also helped to accelerate this process. So I would say that if all the documentation is collected and sent with the corresponding stamps to the country, in 1 to 3 weeks, maybe you can have a company running. It could be different cases, but if I have to give a range, it could be similar like that from our experience.
Wonderful. It's not that bad. I could thought that maybe it took a little bit longer in some of those countries, so that's good to know. Another
point some particularity. For example, in Chile, there is also a system to register a company absolutely online. So you don't need any extra procedure in the notary, etc. So it's like an online system given by the government. So it's an example of how governments are doing better and better on technology in order to make it easier for companies and to make the process more faster and simple.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question that we have. In Chile, the maximum salary of directors mentioned at the beginning, it's monthly or yearly? I believe that it's
Monthly. I
referring to
mentioned a monthly salary, which normally it's like the maximum that you can consider it as deductible. So normally the rest, so you can have a higher salary. So, but the part that exceeds the minimum, it will be taxed differently. So that's the difference.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Next question. Are there current tax agreements between the United States and Latin American countries?
Yes, they are. I should review now. I don't want to give any wrong information, so we can review it if you can send us the question by email. We can check it and give a response of that. But I would say, I remember, for example, that in Chile is not applicable, but we will check for other countries and we'll give you a response of this.
And talking about that, about tax treaties between countries, from what I know, Spain is the country with more tax treaties with Latin American countries in the world. I believe that it has treaties with almost all, not all of them, but almost all of them. And in the past, at least, it was sometimes an advantage to do business in those Latin American countries through a company incorporated in Spain to try to apply those benefits from the treaties. Is that still the situation, or with the reform in the United States from 2019, I believe, changed substantially that status, or is still a good idea maybe to think about operating those business from a corporation in Spain?
Yeah, well, you touch a good point, Juan Carlos. So yes, we have the experience that many international companies, especially those ones that had a subsidiary in Spain, that, as you mentioned, they have double taxation agreements and other good agreements in social security and others. They use that subsidiary just to incorporate a company in Latin America instead of using the mother company. So this is a very analysis that can be done for many aspects. So it's not only to focus on the double taxation agreement, also many aspects has to be considered on this. But yes, it's still happening because some countries that maybe you can think that, for example, Italy, that could have agreements, they don't have so many agreements with the Latin American countries. So they use Spanish companies in some cases to go there. And of course, regarding the last modification, so every case has to be analyzed depending on the distribution of benefits that has the subsidiary will do in the following years, if they will do intercompany invoices. So many cases that can vary or define from where you have to be or incorporate the company, or where the shareholder has to control the subsidiary.
Thank you so much. And also, it's an interesting thing that I believe that it's worth it to study with professionals when you're going to do business in those countries, because maybe there's a way to do it on a more efficient way, at least from the taxes point of view.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. More questions that we are receiving. I believe this has to be with what you mentioned with Chile before. The question is, what about if a Chilean company had operations and revenues in Mexico during 2022? What would be the whole taxes to be paid in Mexico and Chile?
So let me answer this with the general concept. So, of course, as commented before, I don't want to say anything wrong. So every case has to be deeply analyzed in each case. But just to mention that normally taxes paid in Mexico are applicable in Chile. There is few procedures that have to be follow up, like obtain a residence certificate and a copy of the payment, etc. So you can use the taxes as a credit in Chile, according also to them. And in some cases, if the double taxation agreement applies and permits that income is not taxed in Mexico, that will depend on the nature of the gain. So in some cases, that gains are not taxed in Mexico, and you can directly include it in your financial statements in Chile. So it should be analyzed depending on the case, the nature of the gain, the double taxation agreement, but in general, it's how it works.
Thank you so much. Very good. Another question, Pablo asked, in Peru, there is a 30% charge for foreign software products applied by government. Is it avoidable once you set up the local company there?
Well, also, what you have to analyze in this case is if the amount of income that you are getting for the sales done to Peru. So if the buyer is withholding this tax, so you're paying already a tax, maybe because of the volume, it's worthy to establish a company so that you can deduct expenses, you can pay a less corporate tax. So you can have also, it's another reason to think about, you have a presence there, so maybe you can increase your sales because of the confidence that you give to your sellers that you are incorporated in that country. So when these futures are analyzed and you with the calculations, so you get that it's worthy, basically because of the expenses you can deduct on the sale. So some companies opt to incorporate a company there. So at the end, for instance, you will pay a 29.5%, which is pretty the same, but you will deduct the expenses. So it depends on the volume. So at the end.
Thank you so much, Javier. Wonderful. Next question. What are the most common cases for which the added value tax refund on fixed assets would apply?
Well, you could say that it's like an easy way to do it, but it's not that easy. So normally it's a process that you have to collect a lot of documentation, you have to do a lot of explanation to the authorities. So it's not an easy way. So normally the companies that applies for this but refund are companies that they are doing a big investment on the country, so they have assets with high value, and they will recover the investment in a long period of time. So is normally in these cases that the company opts to request this VAT refund, and as commented, it's not an easy process, but worthy. It's the investment is big.
Mhm. Okay, thank you so much, Javier. Very good. Next question. The anonymous company in Peru has a minimum of 1 or 2 people to be established.
I don't want to confuse anyone, so we can check it again.
Okay.
In any case, we will share this presentation with all interested. So
Yes, again, we will share the presentation and also the video recording. So in case you want to share this with your colleagues, you will be able to do that. And of course, we will share the contact information from Javier and Cesar. In fact, you can see their email address now in the screen, and also their phone numbers as well. So you might be able to send them directly any other questions that you might have.
yes, well, actually, it was two shareholders. What I mentioned on the
Perfect. Thank you so much. Another question. In any of the countries mentioned during the presentation, if I am a seller and don't have any presence in those countries, should I have any obligation from the taxation point of view that I need to be aware of?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please, Juan Carlos?
Yes, the question is about a seller, I believe from the United States. If someone is selling goods to any of those countries, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and Colombia, is there any tax requirement that they need to be aware of? Or because they are not incorporated in those countries, they just sell goods and services there, is there any taxable requirements that they need to be aware, or they need to fill out any form, or being just a seller doesn't provide any other burden from the tax point of view?
Well, what has to be defined in this case is which kind of sales they are doing to these countries. So depending on, for example, if you are selling services, they're normally depending on the service, there is apply a withholding. And also regarding goods, normally they are not, but also it's important to analyze the case because as I commented previously, now for Colombia, also the sellers that are selling goods in that country, they must declare and pay taxes from now on, depending on the amount of sales. So this is some question that could be also send it to us, and we could get in touch just to double check it and to give a wider response.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Javier. So let's see. We don't have much more questions at this time. So if anyone would like to send us last questions, we have a few minutes left. Again, we will share this presentation and the recording of the video as well, so that you could share it with your colleagues and friends that might be interested in these taxation regimes in these countries. And please check also the website of the Spain-US Chamber of Commerce for the upcoming events that we are hosting as well in the near future, touching very different topics as well. So it seems that we don't have more questions at this time. So perfect timing. It's just 5 minutes to 12. Oh, wait a minute. We have here a question. Okay, no, that wasn't okay. So, well, thank you so much, Javier, and thank you so much, Cesar, for being with us today and sharing with us about your knowledge. I know that Cesar has a sore throat today and is not able to speak. That's why Javier.
Let me say that. So I forgot to thank also Cesar to help me for this presentation. Unfortunately, is not feeling so well today, but thank you very much. And again, thank you, Juan Carlos, for the time and for the opportunity.
No, thank you.
Cesar? Yes, Juan Carlos. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. And I think it's been a very helpful presentation with very clear points. And it's been very helpful to understand in a brief overview of the differences between those countries. And that I know by a fact that many US companies or Spanish companies located and based in the United States are doing business with. So I think those are very interesting topics. So thank you everyone for spending this time with us and learning about these countries. If you need more information, please contact directly to Extelia. They are experts. They can help you navigate those different regulations, and not only in those countries, they are also present in Europe and in the United States. But if you need to do business in those countries, they will be very helpful and they will help you to reach those efficient points that every company needs when doing business abroad. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Cesar. And see you in the next webinar in the United States, Spain Chamber of Commerce. Have a great day.
Thank you.